52 Sundays. We're here. You guys don't think that's very much of an accomplishment, but for me, I think that's pretty awesome. 52 Sundays. This is the 52nd Sunday of the year, like Pastor Rob just alluded to. It's our transitional Sunday. So next week, we will no longer be in this year. And I don't know what your years look like, but I think it's awesome that we have this opportunity to come together and to share in God's Word. And I love teaching weekends like this because we're going to talk about what our headspace is going to look like in that. And so today I'm going to be talking on the topic of yesterday's ceiling is today's floor. Yesterday's ceilings are today's floors. And when I realized that I was scheduled to speak this Sunday, I began to just really think about what God would have me share. And there's something that Allison, my wife, and I have been talking about for the last several years as we've traveled and taught on some parenting throughout the country. And that is this simple thought. My ceiling will be my children's floor. My ceiling in life will be my children's floor. So the quick example of that is this. I was raised in an alcoholic's home. Both my parents were alcoholics, and then this is the truth. Then in the middle of the night, one night, my mom and I jumped in her truck and we snuck out. We arrived, and you've heard this story, some of you. We arrived at my grandmother's house where we were going to move into a voicemail on an answering machine that had a cassette tape in it. Now, for those of you that don't know what a cassette tape is, they're those things that are tied to like the mile marker poles on the highway. They're like just, anybody else ever see those? The cassette tapes flat? That's like somebody was like, this doesn't fit my CD player. From my father telling us some really, really nasty stuff on that. And that's what my life looked like. And my mother fell in love with Jesus, and thank goodness to a grandmother who introduced us to church. And that was all before the age of 12 for me. And so when I say that my children's ceiling, or my ceiling will be my children's floor, it's really simple. The best context for it is this. There are words that are very familiar in my vocabulary that I will have to explain to my children because they will have no idea what it is. They will have heard about alcoholics, but they will never potentially have been in the presence of an alcoholic. So I will have to explain that to them. They will never know what divorce is. Are you going with me there? Now, some of you that are hearing me say this, you understand this because this is the life that you've been living. You see, we fight for our children's floor. Isn't it interesting? We fight for our children's floor more than we oftentimes fight for our own ceiling. Everybody cool? Good. All right. This is just kind of extra. So, awesome. So we've traveled all over and we've shared that. And then as I began to pray about what it was that I should share this morning, God began to really deal with me about something that He started prompting me with about 3 or 4 months ago. And it was the idea of this. Where we start matters. Where we start matters. If you're taking notes, you can write that down. So 3 or 4 months ago, God really began to deal with me as I was in my prayer time about ceilings and floors. And what that looks like beyond the context of just my wife and I and our children and our family. But what did that look like in the scope of the teams that we lead here at New Hope? And how does it affect us on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and here at the conclusion of 2019, on a yearly basis? And so I began to just visit with our teams and began to check in with them. And if you didn't know what I do here, I don't just play guitar, but I lead some of the teams that are around. So our music teams, our production teams, a lot of our experience teams. And so I began to just ask questions and talk to them a little bit. And what I began to glean from them was there was this pressure because, listen, if I asked you to write down one word to describe New Hope worship, a lot of you guys would write down all different kinds of things, but a lot of it would point at passion. A lot of it would point at pursuit. A lot of it would point at anointed. A lot of it would be, no matter what the team looks like on any given Sunday, it seems like the team generally just gets us there. But then God began to show me, well, what does that feel like for the team? Now, I know that I'm part of the team, but it looks a little different when you're a pastor with oversight and those kinds of things, And so I began to try to put my feet in the shoes of our team. began to think about Courtney, who's at home in Missouri, or Oz, or Seif over here, or any of our musicians, and I began to think, what does that look like to them? What does that feel like to them? The responsibility of it, the weight of it, sometimes even the pressure of it. So God began to show me that if the team was spiritually aware that from week to week they build on each other, that would give them the fortitude spiritually to not feel the pressure, but to feel the freedom. Now, I promise you, there's a context to this as we get deeper into this. There's only 2 points, so we're already in the middle of number 1. So we're in great shape here, everybody. But it gives them the release, the freedom to not have to feel the pressure of leading, but just being worshipers. So each week, their ceiling becomes next week's floor. And that they don't have to try to convince New Hope Church to worship. They just simply come in and worship, and New Hope Church worships. They don't have to convince us to press in. They just come in and lead. Same thing with the production team. So one of the teams that I didn't touch on last week, or last service, it's this one. So most of you guys may know this. Some of you may not know this, but we've been working on a live stream. We believe that there's something powerful happening inside of these 4 walls, and that should be out there. And that there's lives that will, and we have families right now that have found us on our streaming services that have watched us for a month or so and then show up at church. They checked us out, they have little kids, whatever it looks like, and we have all kinds of people that do it. But that team's been working on it, and John Baldwin leads that team, and one of our conversations is this: as long as this week was better than last week, we're in good shape. As long as we can build on it every week. Now, when we get there and we feel really comfortable because we're dealing with technology and internet, and the internet here is, and building the team and all. John's laughing up there. I could see him up there. He's got a headset with a little microphone. He looks like a NASCAR driver, kind of. Sorry. This is why they don't let me talk often. We'll release that to everybody, and we'll let you know where to find that. And if you look on YouTube, you can find it. It's pretty easy. But the idea is that this week's ceiling will be next week's floor, whatever that looked like. So that could be going from 2 cameras to 3 cameras. Or, if I really want to drive John crazy, going from 3 cameras to 4 cameras. Are you there with me? So that's one of our teams that you never see that's doing all of that. But we really had to get into the right mindset. Because if not, we can dwell on all the frustrations. So let's talk about 2019 for you. How's 2019 looked? Okay, so this was the one response that I heard. Translation, not good, I assume. But I would ask you to dig a little deeper. You see, it's really easy for us to always find the negative. But if we'll dig a little harder, let's try to find the positive. Now I was going to text, I was trying to set up a phone number, and stupid Google wouldn't let me do a Google voice, and I didn't want to give all you guys my cell phone number. I love you, but you just weren't getting it. But I was going to have you guys text me the highlights of your 2019, so we could kind of just get a roll of what that looks like, because here's the problem. God is more concerned about your 40 years than he is about your 40 seconds. But we spend all our time thinking about our last 40 seconds. So listen, you may have had something amazing happen in January, but because you felt like December stunk, you're like, oh, my year was terrible. So a couple of highlights that I had. So a lot of you guys have never met her. Allison and I have an older daughter. I should have totally, maybe next service, Darwin, we'll get a picture, but it's okay. We have an older daughter that lives in Indianapolis, and her name's Savannah, and she's married to a young man named Steven. They're the Alvies, and they've been married for a couple of years. On the 22nd, I get a FaceTime from her. Now, part of that is because where they go for Christmas, they have limited cell phone service. I usually head to Tahoe, and she knows that once I get to to skiing that I don't check my phone usually during the day. So she's like, Dad, hey, let's FaceTime. And so Al and I jump on the phone, and we're FaceTiming her, and we're just talking along. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she goes, I'm pregnant! So I don't know what that means for me, other than that I want to buy so many little pairs of shoes, it's crazy. Anybody else do that? Like, I love shoes anyways. So, like, the first thing I did was go to DSW and apply for, no, I didn't really. Our financial peace team was just like, you applied for what? Pastor Mike, report to the office after service. And then just a few weeks ago, which I know a lot of people didn't know it was just because the venue was so small and they would have loved to invited everybody. But a few weeks ago, I got my second son-in-law, Dylan O'Malley. Addie and Dylan got married. And they'll be in third service. They're over serving in the kids department. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have other times where, like, one of my kids was backing my wife's car out of the driveway and just went straight down the side of my car. You're way bigger than me. I won't come down there to fight you. That's Pastor Rob. Sorry. This is not how we normally talk. And again, this is why they don't let me talk. But I have the long laundry list of all of the things. My washer will not get the white stuff off of my black clothes. And everybody already knew that if I was on the platform today that I'd be in black jeans and a black t-shirt and some sort of jacket or shirt over it. That's all I wear for the most part. But I got that washing machine that just won't get the stuff off the clothes. Come on. So no pun intended, but I have a long laundry list too. But I choose to focus on the peaks and not focus on the valleys. You know, a valley is just a transition to an uphill climb to a peak, right? Somebody needs to get that in their life today. A valley is just a transition to an uphill climb to a peak. There's a view up there, and you're going to enjoy it. But God did not call us to camp out on our peaks. We have to get back down in the valley because somebody else may be down in the valley that needs us to come alongside them. But you can get lost in the valley when you turn your GPS off and start worrying about yourself. Listen, I'm not saying that life isn't hard. I'm really convinced, and I'm going to show you guys something from early in my childhood here in a minute. I'm really convinced that life is probably at its hardest right now. Everything from the economy to, and I get it that the economy is good, but if you want to buy a house, you got to mortgage somebody else's house to buy a house. Like, let's be honest, you know? I get it. And I know that everybody has, divorce rate has now equaled the marriage rate in our country. I mean, all of those things. Life's hard. But man, if I'll focus on the good stuff and hang on to the good stuff, it postures me as I transition into 2020. Because too many of you, potentially, if you're like me, are thinking, man, I gained 20 pounds this year. And I was really determined not to. So maybe I should just be determined to gain 20 more. But on the serious note, we're all focused on these resolutions and all the things we need to fix and all those other things. And I would ask you this. Focus on where you're going to start. You see, you're thinking about the finish. You're already trying to predetermine where you're going to land at the end of 2020. And let's just focus on where we're going to start on January 1. And that's why we do the prayer and fasting, and we do all of those things. We're trying to get it to where we're not so lost in what could be. We get focused on what's going to be right here. And so, where we start matters. So, just to have a little fun, if that's okay, because I'm a recovering youth pastor, and life's good. I want to show you guys a commercial, if that's okay. Now, my life was tough when I was a kid, but let me clarify that, okay? I share that story not so that anybody feels sorry for me, because that was my normal. Okay, so as a kid, I didn't freak out about any of that stuff. I didn't understand what was happening. It was probably not until I was 18 or 19 that I understood what my home life looked like. When I looked at my wife at 24 and I said, I have no idea how to be a father or to be a husband, because I had none. I had a grandma and a mom, and, well, they were women, and they husband different. So I don't want anybody to think it's like we didn't have Christmas, because I'm getting ready to show you a commercial for a Christmas present that my sister and I received in 1981, and I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope you laugh a lot. But so let's go ahead and take a look at this.
Okay, Atari, let's see your best pitch.
You're out, Rose.
The Atari video computer system is 20 cartridges with 1,300 game variations you play on your own TV set.
You can't keep me in here, Atari.
Television tonight? Play it.
All right, so who had an Atari 2600? Now, all you really, really saved people are like, no, that was the devil. but we had an Atari 2600, and I brought a few. I bought a few games. Now you guys would be happy to know that I have a second generation Atari 2600 sitting up in my office, and so the games were interesting. Over 100 games. Did you guys catch that in that? Over 100 games, but only 3 different ways to play all 100 games. Like Breakout was Pong. You know, vertical kind of a thing, like solo player. Yeah, you guys are like, I don't have any idea. So let's just go through these. All right, so I brought some games. Anybody else have to do this when they were? How many of you guys, now here, this will really blow all these teenagers' minds. These are called cartridges. These may have been kind of at the same time as 8-tracks. You don't know what that is either. Google it. Then there were cassettes. Then there were CDs. Then DVDs. And now we just stream everything. But how many of you guys ever blew on one of these? And then it still didn't work. So what'd you do? I blew harder. Oh my gosh. How many germs did we share on Atari cartridges? Seriously. All right, so let's go through a few of these. Defender. How many of you guys ever played that? Defender. All right, cool. Berserk. Yeah, no. Okay. Yeah, those were all just like Space Invaders, just with a little different coloring. Let's go. Pole position. How many of you guys felt like you were really going fast on pole position? And you were playing with a joystick. Like, that didn't make any sense. All right. This one. Now, this game really was not a good, like, whoever designed this should be smacked. Video Olympics. Like, this was lame. Like, we all played it once, and then we're just like, okay. Pitfall. Yeah. Those alligators or crocodiles or whatever they were. If you guys don't know what you guys should totally YouTube the graphics on Pitfall if you don't know what it is. Pac-Man. Yeah. Atari Pac-Man was not near as cool as the Pac-Mans you've been playing at the arcade. It was close. But and then finally, Mario Brothers. Now, a lot of you guys just cheered because you thought Mario Brothers was actually started at Nintendo. It wasn't. It was actually started on the Atari 2600. And speaking of Mario Brothers, there was one game, though, that really troubled me. Like, really frustrated me because I could never win. It just felt like. And so I went ahead and I grabbed a snapshot of that. So take a look at this game that really ticked me off as a kid. I don't know who made this video. They were way better than I ever was. So this is Donkey Kong, and obviously you can see the barrels and you can see the fire, and the big monkey at the top, and Princess is up there. Same theme as Mario Brothers. Again, man, Atari, these guys were amazing. So, where you start matters. So, the one thing that I know about video games, though, is this. When you die, you go back to the beginning. And I have a little concern with that. Because I think that as humans, we have to be careful not to be pre-wired with where we go back to when tough stuff happens. And I think that it starts all over the place. It starts from lining up kids for kickball games. It starts with I had it in my notes this. It starts in kindergarten class when you're talking in line and the teacher makes you go to the back of the line. I'm not bitter, but I definitely like to talk. But I think that in nature, we are wired to just immediately go back to the beginning. But I want to show you something that God really, through Donkey Kong, I feel like God showed me this. Every level on Donkey Kong, above Mario's head was the ceiling, but as soon as he climbed the ladder, it became the floor. Every single time Mario climbed a ladder, that next level became the floor, and then there was a new ceiling above his head, and then he would head towards another ladder, and sometimes he got smashed by those barrels, and I wonder what would happen if we just rewrote the script, and instead of just instinctively knowing that we have to go back to the beginning, we began to think, well, where'd that barrel hit me? I'm going to pause for a moment, and then I'm going to start right there. Everybody cool with that? So you've seen that. So I brought this ladder out here, though, because I think that it's a good illustration. So every single time that you played Donkey Kong, it was floor, climb a ladder, ceiling, floor, over and over and over. Like I said, my fear is that we've become preconditioned to the idea that we always have to start over. But that's not how God is. God doesn't always ask us to go all the way back to the beginning. I said it like this in the earlier service. What if every time that there was a struggle in Allison and I's marriage, I retreated back to that 12-year-old kid that was watching his parents duke it out every night? But we have to be careful because sometimes that's where our brain will take us. We will immediately retreat back to there. Allison and I have been married going on 23 years, and it's been an amazing journey. Thank you. But I will tell you that we would both say this. Our first 10 years, the reason that we probably struggled as much as we did, because, everybody's like, the first year's the hardest. Liars. Like, let's be honest. The first year's the honeymoon year, And then it's like 2 to 10 are kind of like a challenge, And if you ain't got Jesus, holy cow. Sorry. But what we realized was that in our years 0 to 10, we oftentimes, and she came from a broken home with adultery and all different kinds of things, but we would immediately begin to respond to the challenges as if we were living in the setting or the environment that we were in when we were kids. So she could potentially respond to me as she saw her stepdad. And I could respond to her as I saw my parents as alcoholics. We began to parent that way. All of these different things. So what we were doing was basically taking ourselves all the way back down to the floor every single time. Rather than climbing a ladder, hitting that next level, maybe get hit by our barrel, pause for a minute, and start over there. Everybody get that with me? So I got this. Our natural instinct is to scream, stop, drop, and roll. Our natural instinct is to retreat. But your unnatural response is to climb. Because as far as I can make it today, tomorrow I start there. I would encourage you to really engage that idea. So point number 2, and we're going to get, you guys are like, he has not said a scripture yet. Good observation. But point number 2, if you're taking notes, keeping score to stay with our video game mindset, is where you finish determines where you start. So this morning I want to use a story, and I love teaching longer passages. I love using stories from the Word and in their fullest context and capacity, because I think that it gives us a little more insight to the fact that 2,000 years ago, these guys, you could pinch them and it hurt, and there was blood going through their veins, and they had to make decisions and navigate things just like we did, you know? And so let's turn over to Luke 5:17 through 26. I'm going to be reading from the NIV. It says, one day Jesus was teaching, and the Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting there. They had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was with Jesus to heal the sick. Some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a mat and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. When they could find no way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and lowered him on his mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd right in front of Jesus. Now, when Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." Now, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, who is this guy who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone? Sorry, that was my kind of take on the sarcasm they had in their minds. And then Jesus knew what they were thinking and asked, why are you thinking these things in your hearts? Verse 23, which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up and walk? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So he said to the paralyzed man, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. Immediately he stood up in front of them, took what he had been lying on, and went home praising God. Everyone was amazed and gave praise to God. They were filled with awe and said, we have seen remarkable things today. I love this story because it starts on a floor but required a ceiling. They came all the way there expecting to just kind of carry their friend in. Now let me clarify a couple of things, because we can get lost in the different characters in our illustration here. The friends that were carrying him, that's where we get really blessed sometimes. We're just like, oh man, those guys are incredible, and I could just hope to be like that. Let me just clarify. No different than today, if two guys were carrying somebody through the mall and they were screaming, I don't want to go, it would be awkward. So our friend who was paralyzed, he had to be a willing participant. He may have even asked them. I'm reminded of the young man who was beside the pool of Bethesda that had been sick for years and years and years. He actually looked at Jesus and said, if someone would just help me get in. So I'm not too thrown off by the idea that maybe this guy even looked at them and says, hey, Jesus is healing somebody. Could you get me there? Maybe they didn't even know who Jesus was. I mean, we could dig deep into this, what that all looks like. But so they knew the power of God was moving and Jesus was healing people in the home, and they could see that, and they get there. And I love it because they did what was unconventional. People don't come through the roofs. So they flipped the script. And they said, we're going to start where nobody else is. We're going to make a way. We're going to make this happen. And so these young men, and I can't imagine what that was like, because they probably had some primitive ladders and different things like that. But they're climbing and they're carrying. They're climbing and they're carrying. And I hope their boots didn't get stuck on the ladder. And they're climbing and they're carrying. And then they get up there and they spread it just enough. And they began to lower. Probably not having any idea, first off, what was going to happen as they lowered him. I've never lowered anybody through a ceiling, but I've been on a ladder up by that rack, and it's pretty scary, so I'm assuming that holding somebody that high in the air would be a challenge. And I'm only just a few feet off the ground, and I don't know that I would want to lower anybody here. Is Jesus going to heal him? Are we going to get in trouble? What's this going to be? So they lower him. And then, of course, you heard the rest of the story. He's at Jesus' feet. Jesus heals him. Says, take up your mat. Now, how many of you guys think that my boy just went out the door and just disappeared into the night? No. I wonder how many times, I didn't share this in the first service, but I wonder how many times he went back up on that roof when he could climb the ladder. And he could get up there. And he could see. Because yesterday's ceiling in his life became today's floor. The power of the Lord is here. That's verse 17. So men carried a paralyzed man, and they tried to make their way into the house. It was a very logical choice. It's verse 18. When they could find no way in, they had to do something that was unconventional. That's verse 19. So they went up to the roof. They lowered him in, and everything changed. You see, where you finish determines where you start. Your natural instincts will be to scream, stop, drop, and roll, and retreat. But your unnatural response has to be to climb, because as far as I can make it today, tomorrow I start here. So for 2020, I've got a couple of challenges. One is this: avoid the comfortable. Avoid the comfortable. Pastor Mike, what does that mean? So here's a simple example. A lot of you guys are passionate in worship, and a lot of you just sneak up here into the front. I dare you to start where you finish. So if one week you finish right here at the end of worship, next week start right here. Because it's funny, because you'll sit in the very back of the room and then walk all the way up here. I know you're trying to get your steps in, but start up here. Do what's uncomfortable. I said this in first service, and it got really, really quiet. Do what's uncomfortable. All y'all that are sitting in the back, scoot up and fill up the front. Everybody that's under the balcony, next week, try to not sit under the balcony. All you sitting up in the balcony, I know that it's comfortable up there, but there's something about being down here with a body of believers that are pressing in and seeing the person on your left that you don't know, and seeing the person on your right that you don't know, and their worship may encourage you to go up another couple of steps. But if you stay in the shadows, in the comfortable, how many steps are you missing? All right. Next, be the first. Be the first. This kind of ties to the comfortable thing. Pastor Mike, what does that mean? Services start at 8:45. Be the first. Be the first. Be the first. Check this out. Be the first to volunteer. Be the first to pick up the trash. Be the first to invite somebody. Be the first to take notes. Be the first to start singing at the top of your lungs. Listen, we make jokes about it all the time, and I get it. The Raiders are finished, and they're moving, and I feel bad for you guys, all of you that are Raiders fans. But none of you guys weren't the first when you went to a Raiders game. 49ers fans, same deal. Giants fans, St. Louis Cardinals fans. I show up during batting practice just so I can get baseballs in the outfield. You know what I'm saying? Like we will be super intentional. And all of these have to do with intentionality. Number 3 is do whatever it takes. If I can learn anything from this story from Luke, it's this. They did whatever it took. And I'm going to tie this to bring someone along. They did whatever it took, including bringing somebody along. If you've got empty seats in your car, fill them up. Okay, 3 people are like, yeah, and then other 200 were like, we don't work for Uber. I'm serious. You've got neighbors. You've got friends. This is it. I've seen so many life transformations because somebody just invited somebody and picked them up. They didn't even have to buy them Starbucks. They just picked them up and brought them. Did you know that 80% of people will come to church if they're just invited? 80% of people. And here in the East Bay, I would actually say that number is way higher because I'm from the Midwest and everybody's got an excuse not to come to church. Out here, every person that we invite, they're just like, yeah, I'll come to church, no problem. And then, of course, Pastor Joe and I, and we're kind of silly this way, we're just like, cool, you can sit by us, you know, and he's on that front row and I'm usually up here playing guitar. So we don't really make them do that. But bring somebody along. I want to close with this. You know how I know that God's doing something amazing here? It's really simple. If you'd like to get one of these later, I'll share with you how. But everybody knows what this is, for the most part, right? Start to follow bundles. Did you know that as of last count, from March 3rd, that if we took a start to follow bundle and we put it on every chair in this auditorium, that would represent every life that has picked one of these up from March 3rd. Church, God's doing something. And you know what these are? Can I tell you what these are? Step, 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 step. That's it. Just a simple plan to take you through some steps, up some ladders, just like Mario did, so you can get up to your next floor. Yesterday's ceilings are today's floors. Would you stand with me today? Here in a moment, our prayer team is going to come and anything that you need prayer for. And I say this oftentimes. We try to substantiate what we're being prayed for. For some of us, what seems insignificant may be the most significant thing in someone else's life. Could be peace, just simple peace.